knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
In the previous tutorial, we discussed the development and structure of the Standard Model. We talked about the three main groups of particles that make up the model: quarks, leptons, and bosons. We explored predictions that the Standard Model has made and how it has proven to be one of the most successful theories in the history of science. We also mentioned the shortcomings of the model and the exciting research that is ongoing to address these and improve it. Finally, we touched on the detection and acceleration methods used by experimental particle physicists to interact with these particles. However, to effectively measure particles and characterize their behavior, there must be a well-motivated place and time to look for them. This means that the lifetimes of particles and the chances of them interacting with each other are extremely important quantities. This tutorial will explore these concepts and ask the fundamental question: why do particles decay at all? The idea of particle decay is somewhat surprising. Why do all particles undergo some form of decay unless prevented from doing so by a conservation law? The simple answer is that these non-fundamental particles can be thought of as excitations, kind of like an electron that has been promoted to an excited state within an atom. Non-fundamental particles exist at a higher energy state than some combination of fundamental particles, which makes them unstable. It is energetically favorable for these particles to decay down to the lower energy configuration of fundamental particles, so they do precisely that at a particular rate depending on their identity. Naturally, one would assume that this means many of the particles that exist in our universe today are fundamental. This is largely true. Electrons, photons, and neutrinos are among the most common. However, protons and neutrons are also very common, even though they aren't fundamental particles. They are made up of quarks and gluons, and they have long lifetimes because of gluon bonds and nuclear stability. Interestingly, isolated protons do not decay, but isolated neutrons do. This disparity, along with the lifetime of the neutron, is the subject of ongoing research. Speaking of lifetimes, what is the lifetime of a particle, and how can it be calculated? Lifetime does not refer to the exact number of seconds that it takes a given particle to decay. Rather, it refers to the average lifetime of the particles in a sample of them. This is dictated by the difference in energy between the particle and its decay products. We know from conservation of energy that on its own, a particle cannot decay into products that are at a higher combined energy than the original particle. However, even if the products are at a very slightly lower energy, the decay is theoretically possible and is simply a lot less likely to occur due to the small energy difference. Generally, the probability of a decay occurring is related to the energy difference between the initial and final states of the decay. The probability of a decay per unit time is called the decay rate gamma. The lifetime of a particle, tau, is then just 1 over gamma, and the number of particles at any given time can be written as n equals n initial times e to the negative t over tau, where n initial is the initial number of particles in the sample. For some particles, there are multiple fundamental particle configurations that can be decay products. In these cases, the decay with the largest energy difference is most likely to occur, and the other possibilities occur with lower probabilities. The percentage of all decays with which each possibility occurs is called the branching ratio, and each of these has a corresponding decay rate. The total decay rate can be found by adding together the individual decay rates, and all the rest of the math can be done the same as before. Branching ratios and particles that can undergo multiple types of decay are extremely valuable experimental tools. The relative abundance of decay products can be observed, and this can inform physicists about which initial particle was present. The other important quantity that needs to be discussed when talking about particle decay and interaction is the cross-section. The cross-section can be thought of as a target size for a particle interaction or scatter. It describes how much space there is for an incoming stream of particles to hit, and is therefore a measure of how likely an interaction is, with units of area that are called barns. Most cross-sections are on the order of millibarns, 10 to the negative 3, but they can go all the way down to femtobarns, 10 to the negative 15, or attobarns, 10 to the negative 18. It isn't the same as a target though, because as particles get closer to the target, they deflect more, rather than a binary hit or miss. This is due to the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics and effects like quantum tunneling. Cross-section depends on a lot of different variables, including the velocity of the incident particles and the forces that mediate the interaction. This interaction is often a type of scattering. Scattering is the process by which particles interact and deflect from their original paths when they encounter other particles or forces. This reveals information about the structure and dynamics of the interaction. By studying particle scattering, physicists can probe the different forces and components that make up the Standard Model. For example, looking at electron-proton scattering led to the discovery of quarks. Common types of scattering are responsible for many phenomena seen all around us, including the color of the sky, which is due to Rayleigh scattering. Scattering can take place with the deflection of a particle, or it can involve multiple products that exit at different energies and angles. We can label theta as a scattering angle, defined as the deflection angle between the incident particle and scattered particle. If we also define the cross-section as sigma and an impact parameter b that describes the distance from a scattering surface, most types of scattering problems can be solved. Another useful tool is the differential cross-section, which is defined as d of theta equals the derivative of sigma with respect to omega, which is also equal to b divided by sine of theta times the derivative of b with respect to theta. Here, d omega is a solid angle. This can be used to explore the scattering angle in more depth, or explore the energy dependency of the cross-section. It is not a purely physical measurement, but rather represents the probability of a scattering event occurring. Both the cross-section and decay rate are made up of two main factors: the amplitude of a process m and the phase space available, or density of final states, known as ρ. When finding these, Fermi's golden rule can be used. Fermi's golden rule essentially states that the decay rate and cross-section are both proportional to the amplitude squared times the phase space of final states available. In other words, gamma is proportional to the magnitude of m squared divided by twice the energy, all multiplied by the density of states ρ. Also, the cross-section sigma is proportional to the magnitude of m squared divided by the flux times ρ. The flux is the flux of the particle beam. We can use formulas for specific particle configurations, assuming m is known. However, how would you find m itself? M is a matrix element that represents the strength and type of fundamental interactions between particles. To find the value of m, physicist Richard Feynman developed rules of scattering. He also developed a system of diagrams, creatively named Feynman diagrams, that help to represent particle interactions and calculate relevant values for these interactions. These are powerful tools for calculation, and they will be discussed later in the series. We now understand why particles decay, and how to use physical quantities like decay rate and cross-section to investigate and predict the decays and interactions between different particles in the Standard Model. These quantities can be tested, for example with measurements of particle lifetime, allowing physicists to develop a good understanding of Standard Model particle properties and the types of interactions that occur between them. Let's move forward and check out the Dirac equation next.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials. Support me on Patreon so I can keep making content. And as always, feel free to email me, ProfessorDaveExplains@gmail.com.